بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله ومن والاه أما بعد. فقال الله سبحانه وتعالى in سورة الذاريات أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. By the winds that scatter the dust, and by the winds that carry the heavily laden clouds, and by the stars that move gently, and by the angels who distribute blessings by Allah's command. Verily, that which you are promised is true, and verily, judgment will surely come to pass.
الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. When we start, we say Bismillah, and then we say Alhamdu Lillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasul. We don't say wassalati wassalami because this is ma'tuf on Alhamd. So it follows it. Say Alhamdu Lillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Na'am. And the second ayah, can you read the second ayah again? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you.
And by the winds that carry the heavily laden clouds.
Heavily laden clouds. If you ever meet a disbeliever who doesn't believe in a creator, doesn't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, an atheist, you tell him Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said the heavy laden clouds, and in another place Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said the heavy clouds, as-sahabu thiqal. How did he know? You claim that this is, written by mankind, by people. How did they know 1,400 years ago? They had science, they had technology, they weighed the clouds. Go on Google. Google, how much does a cloud weigh, or a cloud that is, that's, I don't know what to call them, that will, it will rain and so on. How does it? I remember when I Googled this very quickly, it said 3,000 tons. Subhanallah. 1,400 years ago, we, the Muslims, have been informed by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, giving the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the clouds are heavy. So this is, you can add this to your list, one of the arguments that you could use with people who don't believe in a creator, or even with people who disbelieve in the Quran. You say, how did he know? You tell me. SubhanAllah, it's from Allah. The creator of the clouds is the one who said this. Nah.
Shaykh As-Si'di Rahimahullah explains, this is an oath from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who speaks the truth, swearing by these mighty creations which he has made to be of great benefit and of service to people, to confirm that his subhanahu wa ta'ala's promise is true, and that the day of judgment, which is the day of requital and reckoning of deeds, will inevitably come to pass, and no
How
one
did we know?
can it off.
How did we know that these are great creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How do we know? Does anybody know the answer? You could type in chat, or you could open your microphone and say,
because of what we have been informed by Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam.
From the ayat, from what we have just read. How do we know that these are great creatures, creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How did we know?
Statements of Allah from the Quran itself.
Okay, so how? Which statement?
The ayah that was just read.
Okay, yes, and?
Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by them.
Ahsant, barakallah fik. Naam, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made an oath with them. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes an oath with something, we understand this is great, this is elevated. It is, the status of this thing is high. So these are great creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if anybody asks you and says, what is the wisdom behind Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making an oath? To show us that these are great signs of him subhanahu wa ta'ala, great creatures which he had created that have benefits and so on and so forth for us to contemplate. So showing the importance of these creatures. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. Naam.
As the truthful Almighty has spoken of it, sworn an oath to confirm it, and established proof and evidence for it, why do the disbelievers disbelieve in it and turn away from striving for it? What is meant by the winds that scatter is winds that scatter the dust when they blow gently, and when they blow strongly and cause disturbance, and by the winds that carry the heavily laden clouds.
So this is the meaning of Dhariyat, yeah? What was just mentioned is the meaning of Dhariyat. And now the meaning of فَالْحَامِلَاتِ وِقْرًا. Naam.
That is, clouds that carry a great deal of water, by means of which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings benefits to the land and the people. And by the stars that move gently. That is, the stars.
فَالْجَارِيَاتِ يُسْرًا. This is the meaning, because in Arabic, these might be difficult. That's why I mentioned them, so that the listener who knows Arabic understands that, oh, so this is what is meant by this word or that word. No.
That is, the stars that move easily, with which the heavens are adorned, and people navigate by means of them in darkness on land and sea, and may benefit from them by noticing signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in them. And by the angels who distribute blessings by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command. That is, the angels who distribute
of the meaning of al-muqassimat. This is the meaning of فَالْمُقَسِّمَاتِ أَمْرًا. So these are whom? These are the angels that do what?
Who distribute and control matters by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's leave. Allah has appointed each of them to control some matter in this world and the hereafter, and none of them goes beyond the limits set for him or falls short. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, by the heaven with its tracks, verily you are confused in your beliefs, because of which those who are diverted away from the truth are diverted. Shaykh Sa'di rahimahullah explains, by the heaven with its tracks, that is, the sky with tracks that look like the ripples made on sand or water by the wind.
And this is the meaning of وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْحُبُكِ.
Verily you who reject Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam are confused in your beliefs, for some of you say that he is a magician, some say that he is a soothsayer, some say that he is a madman, and various other statements that are indicative of their confusion and doubt, and that what they follow is false. Because of which those who are diverted away from the truth are diverted. That is,
so this is an indication of his truthfulness. They know he's truthful. He's been living with them for 40 years. They called him the honest, the truthful. So they don't know what to say. Hey, no, he's a poet. No, he's a madman. He's a soothsayer. You understand? So they're trying to make up stuff in order to do what? Because they know that this is different. They cannot produce something like it. So whatever. And you see, even the people of Sunnah and Jama'ah nowadays, people call them how many names? And throughout history as well, they keep on giving them names. Keep on giving them names. Why? Because they are upon the truth. So they gain many names because the people who oppose them differ in their beliefs and so on. So each one gives them a different name. Subhanallah. Naam.
that is, they are diverted from faith and from the evidence and proof of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that gives certainty. The differences in their views indicate that they are flawed and false. By the same token, the fact that the truth brought by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is harmonious in that some part of it confirm others, and there are no differences or flaws in it, indicates that it is sound and that it is from Allah. If it had been from anyone other than Allah, they would surely have found therein many contradictions. In Surah Nisa, ayah 82.
And we find this in all the other books, right? This is found in any other book. The books which have been manipulated and changed. You see, I've given an example. Open the Bible. In the Bible, the whatever version, King James Version, or the versions that have more chapters in them and so on, they claim, sometimes you see some Bibles, what do they have? The Old Testament and the New Testament. They have what? They contain the Old Testament and the New Testament. And also, they have words written in red. They claim that these are the words of Jesus, Isa alayhi salatu wassalam. If you read those, if you actually start reading from what is written in red, you see a lot of tawheed in it. You'll see a lot of tawheed. You will see. For example, that he says that no man knows of the hour. And we're quoting from what they're saying. Not even Isa himself. He says not neither the Son and so on, but it means not Isa himself. It is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who knows. Subhanallah. Just like we have in the Quran. You see tawheed right there. And this obviously clear proof that Isa is not God, and that he's not the Son of God, and that he's not God incarnate, and that he's not and God and you know the Holy Spirit and so on, three in one, and they are the same. And no, because if they are the same, they all have to know the day of judgment, because they created the day of judgment. And you cannot know one thing and not know it at the same time. This is clear-cut contradiction. How can I know something and not know it? So it is not the same. So Isa obviously is a messenger from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why he doesn't know. And only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, just like in the Quran. طيب. When you go and you see the words that are not written in red, and is specifically what Paul has written, you'll see clear-cut contradictions to Tawheed, to these statements. The exact opposite of these statements. Contradictions in your face. That's why this is the manipulation, brothers. There you go. But and brothers, even Sahih al-Bukhari and Muslim, all of it is right. And there is a tiny portion that is debated by the scholars. And we're not saying it is inauthentic. No, it's debated. And we have read the words of Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen in the introduction of Umdat al-Ahkam. And he mentioned one or two occasions in which there was a mistake in Sahih al-Bukhari. And there are 20-30 hadiths from over 7,000 hadiths and so on. And the ulama have studied them. So why are there mistakes in these books? The ulama say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us that perfection is only for his book. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. يعني يأبى الله عز وجل الكمال إلا لكتابه عز وجل. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows that perfection only lies in his book. So something that mankind has produced, you'll still find mistakes in it. Nah. But brothers, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. In no way, shape or form, I'm saying that the hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari are not authentic. They are authentic. Exactly what I said. All of them are authentic. Except for very tiny few that the ulama have spoken about. And we know them. 20, 30 from over 7,700. So this is less than 0.1%. Understand this. Na'am.
Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, may those who base their beliefs on conjecture be doomed. Those who are steeped in ignorance and are heedless. They ask mockingly, when will the day of judgment be? It will be the day when they will be tormented with the fire. It will be said to them, taste your torment. This is what you were seeking to hasten. Shaykh Sa'di rahimahullah explains, may those who base their beliefs on conjecture be doomed. That is, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroy those who tell lies against him, reject his signs and resort to falsehood in their attempts to refute truth, who say of Allah that which they do not know.
Man, this is bad. Brothers, wallahi, this is terrible. Imagine you're basing your success and your life, all of it, the hereafter, on guessing. Imagine this. Let me give you just an example so that you understand. Imagine you hire an accountant and you say, okay, so what is our budget? He says, well, maybe. Starts guessing. What do you do with him? You say, how much did we benefit? How much did we gain? How much did we? You say, well, maybe it could be. So it could be something else. And this is with money, something insignificant. You will die and you will leave this money. This money is not yours anymore. So what about that which is truly yours? What about the hereafter, the life that will never end? You're basing it on guessing, on conjecture, on guessing. What do you do with a person like this? If money, you would instantly punish this person. You would instantly punish him, fire him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best what you're going to do with him. You hire him to do a job and he's guessing. Then what about, which is 1,000,000 times worse? Wallahi, 1,000,000 times is little. This is the hereafter, your never-ending life. You're basing it on conjecture, on guessing. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. Wallahi, we seek refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from this dalal, from this deviance. Naam.
Those who are steeped in ignorance, that is, they are immersed in disbelief, ignorance and misguidance, and are heedless. They ask mockingly, that is, by way of doubt and disbelief, when they will be resurrected, thinking it unlikely. So do not ask about their situation and their bad fate on the day when they will be tormented with the fire. That is, they will be punished because of what they did of evil, both hidden and visible. And it will be said to them, taste your torment. That is, the punishment and the fire that are the consequences of your disbelief. This punishment to which you have ultimately come is what you were seeking to hasten. So now enjoy all kinds of punishment, vengeance, chains, fetters, wrath, and doom. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى, verily, the righteous will be amidst gardens and springs, receiving what their Lord will bestow upon them, because before that they had been doers of good. They used to sleep but little at night, and before dawn they would seek forgiveness, and in their wealth there was a due share for the beggar and the deprived. Shaykh Sa'di rahimahullah explains, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, mentioning the reward of the righteous and the deeds that brought them to that reward, verily the righteous, that is, those who feared Allah and were very pious and obedient, will be amidst gardens containing all kinds of trees and fruit that have equivalents in this world, and those that have no earthly equivalent, such as eyes have never seen the like thereof, ears have never heard of them, and they have never crossed people's minds. And springs, that is, flowing springs that irrigate the gardens and from which people drink, making them flow as they please. Receiving what their Lord will bestow upon them, it may be that what is meant is that the Lord has given the people of paradise all that they wished for, of all kinds of delights, which they receive with contentment and which bring them joy and delight, and they do not ask for any alternative or seek any change. All of them will have attained bliss to such a degree that they will not ask for more. Or it may be that this is a description of the righteous in this world. They accept what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives of commands and prohibitions. In other words, they welcome them open-heartedly and submit to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands, complying with it in the most perfect manner. And they respond to His prohibitions by refraining for the sake of Allah in the most perfect manner. For what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them of commands and prohibitions is the best gift, which deserves to be received with gratitude and submission to Allah. The former meaning is more appropriate to the context because the following verse gives a description of them and their deeds in this world. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, because before that, before they attained that bliss, they had been doers of good. This includes their excellence in worship of the Lord.
So here, Shaykh As-Si'di rahimahullah ta'ala has given two explanations, and then he has chosen one of them to be more correct, or the one that he sees to be the correct one. Naam.
This includes their excellence in worship of the Lord, for they worship Him as if they could see Him, and although they cannot see Him, He sees them. And it includes their kindness towards other people by benefiting them.
So the words that are being translated are ihsan. Ihsan is exactly that. They worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you see Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, or that He sees you. So if you don't see Him, then He sees you. This is called ihsan. So the translator, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him, he translated to kindness and excellence and so on. What is meant here is ihsan, and the definition is given. Naam.
And it includes their kindness towards other people by benefiting them in terms of wealth or knowledge, or using their status to help them, or showing sincerity towards them, or enjoining what is right or forbidding what is wrong, or other ways of showing kindness and doing good. That also includes speaking kindly and gently, and showing kindness to ibad and to animals, whether they are owned by people or not.
And this is, underline all of this. Underline all of this. This is all important, and this should be translated in our behavior. Now,
one of the best kinds of doing good is worshipping the Creator by praying at night, which is indicative of sincerity and of harmony between what is in the heart and the words one utters. Hence, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they, namely the doers of good, used to sleep but little at night. That is, their sleep at night was little. Most of the night was spent in devotion to their Lord, by praying, reading Quran, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, calling upon Him and beseeching Him. And before dawn, that is, the time just before dawn, they would seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they would make their prayer last until the time just before dawn. Then at the end of the night prayers, they would ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness in the manner of a sinner seeking forgiveness for his sin. Praying for forgiveness before dawn is an act that has a special virtue and character that is not present at other times. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, describing the people of faith and obedience, those who pray for forgiveness before dawn, in Surah Al-Imran in ayah 17. And in their wealth,
وَالْمُسْتَغْفِرِينَ بِالْأَسْحَارِ, meaning the one that seek, that make istighfar. Yeah, he said pray. Anyway, it is making istighfar. So they ask for the maghfirah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now,
and in their wealth there was a due share, whether obligatory or recommended, for the beggar and the deprived, that is, for the needy who ask of people and those who do not ask. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in the earth are signs for those whose faith is certain, and also in your own selves. Will you not then see? And in the heaven is your provision, and all that you are promised. By the Lord of heaven and the earth, this is certainly true, as true as the fact of your speaking. Shaykh As-Si'di rahimahullah explains, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, calling His ibad to think and reflect. In the earth are signs for those whose faith is certain. That includes the earth itself and all that is on it of mountains, seas, rivers, trees, and plants that direct the attention of the one who reflects upon them and ponders their significance to the greatness of their Creator, the vastness of His power, and the comprehensive nature of His generosity, and how His knowledge encompasses all things, both visible and invisible. Likewise, in the individual himself, there are lessons and signs of divine wisdom and mercy which indicate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone is the one, the unique, the eternal, and that no one creates but He subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in the heaven is your provision, that is, the origin of your provision in the form of rain and whatever decrees come down from heaven, provision both spiritual and worldly, and all that you are promised of requital in this world and the hereafter. It comes down from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like all other decrees. Having pointed out the signs in such a way that the smart person would pay heed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now swears that His promise and requital are true, and He likens that to the most obvious thing to us, which is our speech. Hence Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, by the Lord of heaven and earth, This is certainly true as the fact of your speaking. So just as you do not doubt your speech, you should not doubt the resurrection after death. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, has there come to you the story of the honored guests of Ibrahim, when they came to him and said, peace? He said, and upon you be peace. You are strangers to me. Then he went quietly to his household and brought a fatted calf. He placed it before them and said, will you not eat? He conceived a fear of them. They said, fear not, and gave him the glad tidings of a son endowed with knowledge. His wife cried out loud, struck her face, and said, how can that be when I am a barren old woman? They said, thus says your Lord, verily he is most wise, all-knowing. Shaykh Sa'di rahimahullah explains, has there come to you, that is, has there not come to you the story of the honored guests of Ibrahim alayhi salam? For it is a strange and wondrous story. They were angels whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to destroy the people of Lut, and he commanded them to pass by Ibrahim, so they came to him in the form of human guests. When they came to him and said, peace, he said in response to their greeting, and upon you be peace. You are strangers to me. That is, you are people unknown, and I want you to tell me who you are. He did not know who they were until after that. Hence, he went quietly to his family. In other words, he slipped away discreetly to bring food for them, and brought a fatted calf. He placed it before them. That is, he presented the food to them, and said, will you not eat? He conceived the fear of them. When he saw that their hand...
So generosity is from the etiquette and manners of the prophets, messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Naam.
When he saw that their hands did not reach out for the food, they said, fear not. And they told him what they had come for, and gave him the glad tidings of a son endowed with knowledge, namely Ishaq alayhi salam. When his wife heard the glad tidings, she cried out loud with joy, struck her face, which is something that women do when they are happy, and they say and do other things that are contrary to ordinary behavior, and said, how can that be when I am a barren old woman? That is, how can I have a child when I am an old woman who is past childbearing age? And moreover, I am barren, and my womb has never been fit to bear a child. So there are two impediments, each of which one on its own is sufficient to prevent me having a child. A third impediment is mentioned in Surah Hud, where she said, and this husband of mine is an old man. That would be a strange thing indeed, in Ayah 72. They said, thus says your Lord. That is, it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has decreed and ordained that. And there is nothing strange about the might and power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Verily, He is most wise, all-knowing. That is, He does what is appropriate and encompasses all things by His knowledge. So submit to His decree and show gratitude to Him for His blessing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, Ibrahim said, then what is your business, O messengers? They said, we have been sent to a wicked people to unleash upon them.
So as we said earlier in the previous surah, that this Ibrahim is not mentioned in the Quran. So qala, meaning he said. So who said? Ibrahim. So this is from alayhi salam. So this is an addition by the translator. Naam.
To unleash upon them a shower of stones of clay, specifically marked and kept with your Lord for the transgressors. We brought forth the believers who were in the city, but we found in it only one household of Muslims, and we left it as a sign for those who fear the painful punishment. Shaykh Sa'di rahimahullah explains, Ibrahim said to them, then what is your business, O messengers? That is, what is your purpose and what do you want? Because he felt that they were messengers whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent for some important purpose. They said, we have been sent to a wicked people, namely the people of Lut, who had done evil deeds associated others with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rejected their messenger, and committed shameful deeds that were utterly unprecedented. To unleash upon them a shower of stones of clay, specifically marked and kept with your Lord for the transgressors. That is, each one is marked for a specific person because they had transgressed and overstepped all bounds. Ibrahim alayhi salam started to argue with them for the people of Lut in the hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might ward off the punishment from them. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, O Ibrahim, cease your pleading, for verily the decree of your Lord has gone forth. Verily there is coming to them a punishment that cannot be averted. In Surah Hud.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say pleading. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say pleading. What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? أعرض عن هذا. So turn away from this. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward those that translate, but I don't think that this is appropriate. Why change what is said? We have a word exactly for this. أعرض عن هذا. Turn away from this. So brothers, this is an advice to anybody who's translating. When you have a word like هذا, which is this, in this context, why do you change it? Why do you say pleading? Even if you looked at the tafsir of Imam As-Si'di, you think he's the only person who has made tafsir? No, there are so many ulama that made tafsir. And a lot of these meanings are hidden from you. A lot of these meanings are hidden. You're not somebody who has read over 100 tafsir and he's making and so on and he knows what the ulama said. No, you're a translator. Sometimes translators, they actually are not even students of knowledge, and that makes them mistranslate things. So the advice is, when you have a situation like this, then translate with that which is equivalent. You have أعرض عن هذا, turn away from this. Don't change this. Don't change this word into something else just because you read one tafsir or two tafsirs. No, when you're translating the Quran, translate it like this, because there are other tafsirs and some people are going to make other tafsirs than this. Now, and I mean not in consideration to this ayah, but I mean in consideration in general. There are more tafsirs that have other meanings and so on. So when you translate, you don't just translate based on one thing that you have read. No, when there is an equivalent in the language itself, then you shouldn't change it. Nah.
We brought forth the believers who were in the city, but we found in it only one household of Muslims, namely the household of Lut alayhi salam, apart from his wife, for she was one of the doomed. And we left it as a sign for those who fear the painful punishment, so that they might learn a lesson from it and know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is severe in punishment and that his messengers are honest and trustworthy.
طيب, now there is a chapter which is mentioning some of the benefits and wisdoms that are mentioned in the story. Brothers, before we begin, pay close attention, because this is filled with benefits, with important benefits here. So pay attention to this. Listen closely. Now,
the wisdom and rulings seen in this story include the following. It is wise that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells his ibad the stories of both good and evil people, so that they may learn from their stories and the fate of each group.
So if somebody asks about the stories in the Quran, this is the answer. Why? Say this. Now.
Second, the virtue of Ibrahim al-Khalil alayhi salam, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins his story with that which sheds light on its importance and how he paid special attention to it. Third, it is prescribed to be hospitable, for this is the way of Ibrahim al-Khalil alayhi salam, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enjoined this prophet and his ummah to follow. Allah mentions it here by way of praising it.
So this is an example set for us. Now.
Fourth, the guest is to be honored in various ways, in word and deed, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the guests of Ibrahim as honored. In other words, Ibrahim alayhi salam honored them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the hospitality that He offered them in word and deed. They were also honored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fifth, the house of Ibrahim alayhi salam was a place that was frequented by passers-by and visitors, because they entered upon him without seeking permission. Rather, they followed the etiquette of initiating the greeting of salam, and Ibrahim alayhi salam responded with a more complete greeting, because his greeting, as indicated by the Arabic wording, was indicative of a wish that peace be upon them all the time. Sixth, it is prescribed to ask people who come to you or with whom contact takes place to introduce themselves, because there are many benefits in doing so. Seventh, we see Ibrahim alayhi salam's politeness and gentleness in speech, as he said, "You are strangers to me," in the 25th ayah, rather than saying, "I do not know you." The difference between the two phrases is obvious. Eighth, one should hasten to offer a hospitality, because the best good deed is that which is done without delay. Hence, Ibrahim alayhi salam hastened to prepare a meal for his guests.
نعم, and Sheikh Sulaiman al-Ruhaili حفظه Allah and others of the ulama, Sheikh bin Uthaymeen and others, they insinuate this, brothers. They insinuate this, especially also when they are mentioning the rules of fiqh and so on, that being you hasten to something is a worldly thing. Patience is required, and taking your time is required. But when it is goodness, when it is ibadah and hasanat, hasten to it. Hasten to it. And Sheikh Sulaiman al-Ruhaili actually explains this in his explanation of al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya for Imam As-Si'di, Manzumat al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya, and he has many explanations for that. This is specifically that he has done for the students of the University of Islamic Studies. So, and also Sheikh bin Uthaymeen has mentioned that also the haqq, brothers, when the truth is told to you, you hasten to believe it and act upon it and accept it. Because if you do not do so, it is a reason for being prevented from this truth and this haqq and so on. When somebody sees the truth and he realizes that this is the haqq, this is the truth, and he says, wait, let me think about it, let me see. No, this might be a reason that he will deprive from this haqq later on. That is why it is incumbent upon us, brothers, that we hasten to good deeds. We hasten for things that we think are good. And so you're thinking, what should I do right now? Should I listen to for example, should I seek ilm? Listen to the lecture of Sheikh Sulaiman al-Ruhaili, for example, or should I, relax a little bit and maybe a little? No, hasten to goodness. Should I read the Quran now? Yes, hasten to goodness. Since you're going to do it, do it. Don't procrastinate. And when the truth is told to you and you realize inside you realize, you're like, this is true, then also quickly accept it and act upon it, so that you're not deprived from this haqq. And the one who is deprived from haqq, this leads to deviance, brothers, and transgression. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. Na'am.
Ninth, if meat that has already been prepared is offered to a guest, this is not disrespectful in the slightest. Rather, it is an honor, as Ibrahim alayhi salam did that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that his guests were honored. 10th, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of what He blessed and His close friend Ibrahim alayhi salam with of great generosity, as this food was ready to be served, and his house was in a state of constant readiness to welcome guests, so he did not need to go and fetch food from the market or from his neighbors and the like. Ibrahim alayhi salam was the one who served his guests, even though he was the close friend of the Most Gracious. The man of dignity and honor is the one who serves his guests. 12th, he brought the food to them, to the place where they were sitting, and he did not put it somewhere else and tell them to come and have some food, because this is easier for them and is better. 13th, one should speak gently and show politeness to one's guest, especially when offering him food. Ibrahim alayhi salam offered the food to them and requested them to eat in a very gentle manner, saying, "Will you not eat?" in the 27th ayah. He did not say, "You have to eat," and other such phrases that are not the most preferable. Rather, his approach was that of requesting them to eat. 14th, the one who
So this doesn't sound right in English, does it? Will you not eat? This doesn't sound right. So subhanallah. But in Arabic, it sounds very polite. ألا تأكلون? When this is translated literally, it says, will you not eat? But this way of speaking in English is not polite, is it? I mean, correct me if you're wrong. This is your mother tongue. MashaAllah, so many of you are native English speakers. This doesn't sound polite, does it?
No.
So, yeah, so the difference from one language to another, you see what happens. So that if we wanted to translate that more appropriately, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward the translators, what would you suggest? A very nice way of saying, will you not eat? I'm waiting for the answers in chat, or you can open your mic, no problem.
Maybe you can say, "Are you not hungry?" or something like that.
ألا تأكلون. So would you say, would you like to eat? نعم. Will you eat? I think this is still in it. Will you eat? So yeah, like what our brother, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him, our brother Yahya, he said, would you like to come and eat? Yeah, would you like to eat? Would you eat? This is still not very polite. Would you like to eat? Something like that. ألا تأكلون. Would you eat?
think,
Would you like to eat?
Allah knows best, but if you wanted to really be like charitable to them, you could just say, "Please eat," because if it was like, "Would you like to eat?" it kind of like opens up like a no possibility. If someone's like very modest, he might say no, even if he's hungry. So if you're like,
well,
"Please
this is
eat,"
what it says. ألا تأكلون, right? In Arabic, the word ألا تأكلون, like, would you like to eat? So something to that extent, something that is nice, that is a suggestion, yeah, to that extent. نعم.
14th, the one who wants to follow his example should use nice words as appropriate to the situation, such as saying to his guests, "Will you not eat?" or "Please do us the honor of eating with us," and the like. 15th, if a person is afraid of someone for any reason, that person should reassure him and say things to
والله
put
يا
his...
أخوان, يعني how many benefits did we just benefit? Are you paying attention? If you're not paying attention, go back and read from the book. If you are if you need to listen to this while you're driving or something, listen to the recording. These are benefits, wallahi, brothers. Where do we find this? And with proof that Ibrahim alayhi salam, look how the ulama derive these lessons from the Quran. When we read the Quran, we read these ayat, we don't understand 1% of these things. So now the ulama, they open our eyes. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the prophets, they don't pass down like as their inheritance, yeah, they don't pass down wealth as dinars and dirhams, as if saying dollars and money, but they only pass down what? Ilm, the ilm of the shar. So these the ulama, they are the heirs of the prophets. Hum warathat al-anbiya. They are the heirs of the prophets. So this is what our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught us. So now, and there is no doubt that Imam As-Si'di is a alim. There's no doubt he's a scholar. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on him. نحسبه والله حسيبه. So the Shaykh, the Shaykh is what? Is opening our eyes to the meanings, to the learned lessons, the benefits that we get from this story. So pay attention to this. And when you do something like this, when you implement this, because this is the benefit of ilm, you translate it into actions. So when you change yourself, you say, look, when guests come to me, he who is, Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam, who is better than me and better than the Sahaba, the companions of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's better than them. He served people with his hands. He did this. He got closer to them and served people with his hands, and he said beautiful words and said this and that. So we learn. So what do? We say we will treat our guests the same way. But our guests are rude. So what? Our example is Ibrahim alayhi salatu salam. When we do such a thing, we're doing this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not for the sake of these guests to be nice or to reward us. Or no, we're doing none of that. This is not sincerity. What is sincerity? We're doing this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we implement this in our lives. So we go back, we study this, and we say, we will change ourselves. I don't do this, I will start doing this, inshallah azza wa jalla. This is the fruit of ilm. You see the impact of ilm, the reflection of ilm in your behavior, in your manners. But you say, I'm not like this. We say, okay, accustom yourself to being like this. Teach yourself to be like this. Nobody got out the womb of his mother like this. He taught himself. He taught himself. And don't be like, don't say, well, you know, I am 40 years old, I am 50 years old, I'm 60 years old, I'm not going to change now. Why not? The Sahaba did. Why not? What is this notion that we hear about these days? This idea that, you know, if he's older, he's never going to change. Ya akhi, I'm talking to you. If you are older, change, ya akhi. Change, no problem. When you change to what? You are following the example of the prophets. You're following the example of the messengers, the prophets, the companions, the ones who followed the companions, tabi'een. Tabi'een are whom? The people that followed the companions, and so on. Why don't you do this? Is it so hard to sit with yourself and you talk to yourself in your head, you say, Wallahi, this is true. Why don't I translate these things into action? Am I not man enough? Should be. Why don't I pray at the mosque with the jama'ah? Am I not man enough? I'm not talking about people who are sick and sitting home because they are sick, and before they were sick, they were praying in the jama'ah, or somebody who's, you know, the mosque, especially at your places, the mosque is 2 hours away. Or so. This is not what we mean. You're sitting and you can go to the jama'ah. Why shouldn't you go to the jama'ah and pray? Why aren't you man enough to do that? This is manhood. What do you think manhood is? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes in the Quran as so. That they rijalun, they are men that trade and does not and the wealth does not. Let me bring the ayah itself before I say something else. La ilaha illallah. This is Surah Al-Jum'ah, right? Or am I mistaken? Abdullah.
العزيز رجال
لا تلهيهم تجارة
ولا بيع عن ذكر الله وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة.
So which surah is this? Okay, so this is Surah An-Nur. Surah An-Nur, I'm looking at Google. This is Surah An-Nur, ayah 37. Ayah 37. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, men. Look what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, huh? Men. رجال. So Allah described them as men. لا تلهيهم تجارة ولا بيع عن ذكر الله وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة يخافون يوما تتقلب فيه القلوب والأبصار. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, men. So he's saying these are men, huh? Men whom neither commerce nor sale distracts them from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and performance of prayer, salah, and giving of zakah. They fear a day in which the hearts and eyes will fearfully turn about. Sheikh Abdulrazak Al-Badr, in his commentary or explanation of the book of Imam As-Si'di. So Imam As-Si'di, brothers, he has this tafsir, which is called what? The tafsir we are reading right now is called Tafseer Al-Karim Ar-Rahman fi Tafsir Kalam Al-Mannan. So this is Tafseer Al-Karim Ar-Rahman. He has a shorter version of this book, summarized one. It is extremely beneficial. He chose the most important ayat and made the tafsir of. So it is a lot more summarized than this, called Tafseer Al-Latif Al-Mannan. Tafseer Al-Latif Al-Mannan. And the Sheikh AbdulRazzaq Al-Badr, حفظه الله تعالى, he explained this book, I think in more than 100 classes, sessions. So when he reached this ayah, or not when he reached this ayah, actually, he just mentioned this. This is what I remember. He said that he will never forget that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned Rijal, it was at the first word at the top of the page. The first word at the top of the page. These are Rijal, these are men. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defining men. Who are men? Who are they? La tulhihim. So neither commerce nor sale distracts them from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So seeking their rizq, their provision. They are, making trade and so on, and selling and buying and taking their needs and their primary needs and so on, does not distract them from remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and performing salah. Ya akhwa, these are men, and giving zakah, fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at that. They fear that day, the day of judgment. Subhanallah. These are men, ya akhwa. So don't tell me I am 40, I am 50 years old. When you hear this, it should be reflected in your action. When you listen and learn today, what did we learn? That Prophet Ibrahim, alayhi salatu wassalam, he did this, then we follow in his example. We do just like he did. Or what is the benefit of sitting here and listening to this? Why are we gathering here? To seek ilm. To do what? Seeking ilm just to have ilm, and on the day of judgment, this ilm is going to be against us? Not acting upon this ilm? La ya ikhwa. Let's take this as an example. These are men, and we want to be amongst them. We want to follow in their footsteps. Naam.
15th, if a person is afraid of someone for any reason, that person should reassure him and say things to put his mind at rest and calm him down. As the angels said to Ibrahim alayhi salam when he was afraid of them, "Fear not," in the 28th ayah. And they told him of those glad tidings after he had been afraid of them. 16th, we see the great joy of Sarah, the wife of Ibrahim alayhi salam, to the extent that she struck her face and cried out loud, which was not usual behavior on her part.
And
17.
And nowadays, the media is trying to show you, the media in everything is trying to, pushing for tens of years now, pushing down the throat of everybody that watches this stuff, this garbage that is being produced, that having children is not good, don't have children. Oh, it's your life is so much. Even you see it in commercials, you see it in everything that is produced nowadays. Ya akhwa, this is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who tells you that children are not good? You're missing so much if you believe in this nonsense. This is garbage. And if you believe and eat this garbage, you're only going to harm yourself. That's the only thing you're going to do if you're eating up this nonsense that they are spreading. Ya akhwa, children are one of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who told you that children are not good? Who said that, oh, this is responsible? They always put the image of the parents who are dying because of their children. We all have children. Who said so? Relax. Wallahi, it is the opposite. It is the opposite. They are the joy. MashaAllah. They are, Allahumma barik. They are, and daughters, they are the reason, one of the reasons of you entering Jannah. When the Prophet ﷺ was asked about having a person having 3 daughters, and he raises them correctly and righteously and so on, they are a reason for him to enter Jannah. And then the companion asked the Prophet ﷺ, said, "And 2," and the Prophet said, "And 2." MashaAllah, these are glad tidings for people who have daughters, to care for them. And the Prophet ﷺ said about the qawarir, in the rifqan bil qawarir, meaning what? This is at some of the very last admonishments, advices that we got from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ before he died, that he said, treat them with tenderly. Meaning what? Meaning women, all women, you treat them tenderly. And he called them qawarir. Qawarir meaning something like a vase or something that could be broken. If you mistreat them, they will be broken. This is what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, and so on. So even when the Bedouins, the Arab, they came to the Prophet ﷺ and they said they don't even kiss their children. They are stern, very stern people and harsh people. The Prophet ﷺ said, and us, we kiss our children. And so the Prophet ﷺ, when his grandchild was brought to him and he was dying. His grandchild was dying, ya ikhwa, in the hands of the Prophet ﷺ. Look at the calamity. The Prophet ﷺ, tears started dropping from the eyes of the Prophet ﷺ. And when he was asked about this, he said, this is rahmah, mercy, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made in the hearts of men. Ya ikhwa, what is this nonsense that we see on TV? And it will continue. This nonsense is just pushed down the throats of everyone that's watching it. Subhanallah. Just everybody has to be treated equally. No, this is injustice. Nowhere does it say in the Quran or the Sunnah that we have to be treated equal. We shouldn't be treated equal. We should be treated with justice, ya akhwa. If we're going to treat everybody equally, this is injustice. You treat the elderly like you treat the young. You treat little kids as you treat grown-ups. You treat the sick like you treat those who are healthy. What is this? What is this nonsense that we are hearing nowadays? And people are making slogans out of this. Subhanallah. You see drugs. Drugs are being pushed down the throats of people. That drugs equal happiness. Never. Have you seen a man on drugs? Allah, ya ikhwal, that there is in no way, shape or form that they are happy. They are putting this, they are sedating themselves, putting themselves to sleep. Sometimes you ask him, you say, why do you take this, ya akh? What is wrong with you? Why? He says, it helps me sleep. I can't sleep otherwise. He's so broken that he cannot even sleep without this substance from the shaitan, this action from the shaitan. They're pushing down your throats, smoking bad things, crimes, and wallahi, nowadays we see criminals and murderers and stealers and people who have been stealing and so on. They are being what? Glorified in media. People know their names. They say, oh yeah, this great criminal, his name is so and so. These are not great. These are scum. They are they are amongst what? Amongst the, when you say criminals, what are you describing? Something you aspire to be or something you stay away from? Something you stay away from. Al-fitr, intakasat al-fitr, ya ikhwa. People are now admiring things which should not be admired. This is being pushed down your throats. And now compare. Look at the Quran. What is the Quran teaching us? Look at the manners. Look at the hospitality, at the appreciation of blessings, at the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ, and he's trying to, argue and so on and so forth. The justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so on and so forth. Wallahi, lessons that should be spread everywhere. But no. What is spread now is drugs and alcohol and smoking weed and fornication and men acting like women and women acting like men and I don't know what and this and that and equality and I don't know what and equality in the good sense is okay, of course, it is admirable, but with justice, not like this unconditional equality, as if that is the and so on, and criminals and people who steal and people and usury and so on and so on, all this filth that is being pushed down the throats of everyone as a source of entertainment. No, this is not entertainment, this is programming. They are telling you this is okay and you have to accept it, and if you say anything else, then there's something wrong with you. Everybody's gonna ostracize you and look at you as weird and as a... What free thinking are we talking about? What free thinking are you talking about? None. This is why, ya ikhwa, I always say this. When we want manners, the best of manners are in the Quran and the Sunnah. Follow the Quran and the Sunnah. Leave this out of your life. Don't watch this. Don't consume this. Stay away from this. There's no need for this. No need for the killing and I don't know what in games and in everything has killing in it, as if this is normal. No, killing is not one of the deadliest sins, the major sins on top of the list of major sins. Ya akhwa, lives are not cheap. The same thing with the ones who call for what? For khuruj. They say make khuruj even a million, if a million, this is the fatwa of somebody. He said, even if a million person dies, no problem, it's for the sake of 80 other million. Ya akhi, this is clear cut in the contradiction of the Quran and the Sunnah. The Quran and the Sunnah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that if somebody kills one innocent soul as if he killed all of humanity. This is a clear contradiction of the Quran. When one of the Sahaba he was in a state of fighting, one of the Sahaba, Usama, radiyallahu anhu arda, Usama bin Zayd, when he was, and if somebody can post the hadith, when they were, there was one of the disbelievers and he has hurt the Muslims very much, and then when they caught him and they wanted to kill him and he said La ilaha illallah, I said Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, so they killed him. I think Usama bin Zayd, na'am, I think Usama bin Zayd, I'm not, if somebody can post the hadith, I'm not mistaken, inshallah azza wa jal. So when they went back to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, you killed him even despite though he said La ilaha illallah, and he kept repeating it and kept repeating. So the Prophet ﷺ held in disdain one life that just entered Islam. The life of a Muslim is precious. Innocent life is, you cannot kill an innocent life, Muslim or non-Muslim. A person, even a non-Muslim who enters a country with visa and so on, you're not entitled to harm them. Ya akhi, we have to understand this. This is Kharijite thinking. This is Kharijite actions. This is what they call nowadays terrorism. This is Kharijite, ya ikhwa. This is not allowed. The Prophet ﷺ, when he described them, he said the hounds of the hellfire, of the Jahannam. The hounds. The Prophet ﷺ did not agree to any of this. Focus, brothers. Let's focus. Let's understand our deen. Let's understand these. The teachings of Islam are the top teachings. The teachings, the manners of the prophets and that are mentioned in the Quran and the way of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the etiquette and the manners are on top. You will never find something better. Wallahi, I dare you. Until the day of judgment, you will never find something that will correct society and correct your life and make you comfortable in this life, and you will be rewarded in the hereafter, than the Quran and the Sunnah. Even the kuffar believed this. Even the kuffar. When there was I don't remember his name, something J. Hart, when he made the list, and he's a Christian, of the top influence of the top characters in the world and influence and so on, he didn't put Jesus, and Jesus is his God. Imagine this contradiction. Wallahi, it's amazing, astonishing. He put Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as number one, more than his God, the one he worships. What is this? Yeah, they realize it. They realize it. Even in the United States, they put Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as one of the best legislators in the history of humankind. And the United States is what? Is a secular country or a Christian country and so on. Not a Muslim country to say, well, they're biased to their religion. Ya ikhwa, let's realize this. Every goodness is in Islam. Every goodness is in what Islam calls for. Now, when people distort Islam and they start speaking in the name of Islam, we disregard them unless he brings the evidence. This is why for so many years we said, why don't we have in English the fatwas of Sheikh bin Baz, for example, and Sheikh bin Uthaymeen, and all of this being spread? Why not? Only recently, and this is individual efforts. And ya ikhwa, and tell anybody that you know who is capable of translating the website of Sheikh bin Baz, the fatwa of Sheikh bin Baz. If you want something, you could write something in Arabic, and after it you write bin Baz, you will see there is a website that is called bin Baz. What do? They bring the fatwa of Sheikh bin Baz with his voice, and they put the fatwa read in Arabic, so you can listen to it or you can read it. Wallahi ya ikhwa, if there is a team of translators, that could translate this, and they are sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I cannot stress enough how beneficial this would be. And it would be, they would talk to the people that the owners of the website, or they would make bin Baz in English. Fatawa of Ibn Baz. You don't need to look at another place. You have the Mufti of humankind of his time. Mufti al-Anam, al-Shaykh al-Allama, al-Imam, Shaykh al-Islam, Bin Baz rahimahullah ta'ala. And this is what Shaykh AbdulAziz Al says. He says Shaykh al-Islam, Shaykh Bin Baz rahimahullah ta'ala. And sometimes he does what? He describes him as the Shaykh al-Mujaddid, Shaykh Bin Baz. He was the Mufti, the one who makes fatwas of people at his time, the Grand Mufti at his time. Wallahi, if somebody translates this website in English, or other languages as well, how much benefit. Wallahi, ya ikhwa, if you know people that are capable of doing this, tell them to do it. Wallahi, I advise you, and I advise anybody who hears this or listens to this. Ya ikhwa, if you can do this, translate this website. It is filled with the fatwa of Sheikh Bin Baz. And you have a website, easy, an English speaker, a Russian speaker, whatever it is, they enter, they say, what is the ruling on so and so? Instantly he gets a fatwa of Sheikh Bin Baz, the Grand Mufti. Instead of having to enter websites, and the person of these websites, he has tendencies with sects and political parties and whatever it is, and they have some of the aqidah of the Kharijites, or some of the aqidah of the Ash'aris, or some of the aqidah of so on and so forth. But you have no alternative, so you have to turn in English. Wallahi, ya akhwa, if somebody does this, I think this is an enormous, gigantic project. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward anybody who plans to do this. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward anybody who sets out to accomplish this project. Ameen. Na'am.
17th, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored Ibrahim alayhi salam and his wife Sarah with the glad tidings of a knowledgeable son. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and there is another sign in the story of Musa alayhi salam when we sent him to Pharaoh with compelling proofs. But he and his people turned away.
Now, I'm sorry to interrupt you, akhi. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. So the brothers, they put the hadith. I said put the hadith, and they did. So it's in Bukhari and Muslim. The Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the person, so is it Usama bin Zayd, as I said? Na'am, Usama bin Zayd. Na'am, it's Usama bin Zayd. And so I'm only gonna, so you have more than one narration. I'm just gonna put the one from Bukhari and Muslim that says here from Bukhari and Muslim. It says what? So the Prophet ﷺ said to him, he said, did you kill him in spite of his prophesying, La ilaha illallah? I said, meaning Usama bin Zayd, O Messenger of Allah, he said out of fear of our arms, meaning Usama bin Zayd is saying he didn't really mean it. He just said this so that we don't kill him. This is what it means. He sallallahu alayhi wasallam said what? Said, why did you cut his heart open to find out whether he had done so sincerely or not? Did you open his heart? Meaning, did you open his heart and see? Is it sincere or not? Then he continued repeating it, meaning the Prophet Muhammad continued repeating it until I wished. Who said I wished? Usama bin Zayd. He said, until I wished that I had embraced Islam only this day. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. Now,
but he and his people turned away. And he said, adding of Musa, a magician or a madman. So we seized him and his troops and flung them into the sea, and he was to blame. Shaykh Sa'di rahimahullah explains,
Ya akhwa, the brothers that are here, I know that this is the time now for our for Umdat al-Ahkam, but we're not going to do so. We will continue with tafsir. So the lesson for Umdat al-Ahkam today, inshallah azza wa jal, will be cancelled, and instead we will continue until we reach until we finish with this, inshallah azza wa jal, with the tafsir. Inshallah next class, inshallah azza wa jal, will be Umdat al-Ahkam. Will be Umdat al-Ahkam, inshallah azza wa jal. Na'am ya.
Shaykh Sa'di rahimahullah explains, and there is another sign in the story of Musa alayhi salam, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him with to Pharaoh and his chiefs of clear signs and dazzling miracles. This is another sign to those who fear the painful punishment. When Musa alayhi salam came with that compelling proof, Pharaoh and his people turned away. That is, they turned away from the truth and paid no attention to it. And they criticized it in the worst manner, saying of
نعم.
Musa,
What did Musa? So they said Sahirun or Majnun. They said he's a magician or he's a madman, he's crazy. What did he do? He made khuruj. He started going on the mimbar and saying, let's make khuruj. Fir'aun, he's kafir, there's no doubt. The ulama say the biggest kafir from mankind is Fir'aun. Fir'aun is the biggest kafir. If somebody asks you and says, who's the biggest kafir of mankind? You say Fir'aun. And not one messenger, two messengers are sent to him. Musa and Harun. Moses and Aaron. Musa and Harun. And they said the worst of things to Musa. What did he do? He made khuruj. He made mudaharat. He protested. He did mudaharat. No, he didn't. If this was an Islamic way, they would have done it. Why would they be silent when it comes to one of the means and the best means of Islam? But wallahi, this is not what they did. Wallahi, this is not. Some people, they think this is the right way. No, this is the way of the Kharijites, ya ikhwa. To make khuruj and make all these problems and killing and all of this. Safety goes away with all of this. Subhanallah. What did they do when these things were done to them? Keep in mind, the ulama say, you are neither better, you are not better than Musa and Harun, and your Muslim ruler is not worse than Fir'aun. So what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala command them? What did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala command them? He said, اذهبا إلى فرعون إنه طغى. Go to Fir'aun, verily he has transgressed. طغى what? طغى in what? He transgressed what? In what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not mention. وحذف المعمول يدل على العموم. And this is a qa'idah. This is a qa'idah. The ulama say in the tafsir and so on. So this is a rule that when the object is omitted, then it means generality. What does that mean? It means transgressed all bounds. Generality, all bounds. He transgressed, and you see this in the translations. Transgressed all bounds. Okay, what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala command them to do? Fight him, kill him, make khuruj and do this and no, none of this. What did Allah say? فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا لَعَلَّهُ يَتَذَكَّرُ أَوْ يَخْشَى. And say to him, not behind his back. The Imam of the Sunnah of Jama'ah of this time, Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, he notes this. He says, فَأْتِيَاهُ, go to him. فَقُولَا لَهُ, say to him, in both ayat, because these are two different ayahs. So فَقُولَا لَهُ, to him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have told them, say behind his back. They didn't. So you say in front of him. فَقُولَا لَهُ. What do we say to him? Lenient words. So that he might remember and fear. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said what? In the other ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَأْتِيَاهُ فَقُولَا أَرْسِلْ مَعَنَا بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل. So go to him again and say to him, not behind his back, and tell him, send with us the people of Israel. And in the end, he says, وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَى مَنِ اتَّبَعَ الْهُدَى. And they say, and peace upon the one who follows guidance. These are beautiful words, brothers. Wallahi, very lenient, beautiful words. They are saying this. Why? Because he is a ruler at that time. He's a ruler. He was governing, and he was and so on and so forth. And there is a lot of bloodshed, and when the clash happens, there's a lot of bloodshed and mafasid and corruption and so on. What else? In other ayats as well, what is it said? La ilaha illallah. طيب, no problem. So these are some of the ayat. So ya ikhwa, this is the command in the Quran. So we ask the people that say otherwise and say the khuruj and the protesting and revolutions and so on. Where did you get that from? You got it from the Quran? Wallahi, you didn't. The Quran says Otherwise, did you get it from the Sunnah? No. And the ahadith are so many about this. Where did you get this from? Then they turn around and they say, no, 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 you are Wahhabis, you are Jamis, you are Madakhila, you are the ulama of the Sultan, the I don't know what, and they make takfir, and so on, and so they make takfir on these people, and so on and so forth. This is following the Quran and the Sunnah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Sahih Muslim says in Hadith Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman, وسيقوم فيهم, and when he asked them about the evil and good, and he used to ask about evil, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that there will be rulers who their sunnah is not my sunnah, لا يستنون بسنتي, meaning their way is not the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is this ruling by the ruling of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I ask you, the sunnah that is not the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is this ruling by the ruling of Allah? Of course not. If their sunnah is not the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they're not following the sunnah. So this is not Islam. This is other than Islam. So وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ بِهُدَايَ, and their guidance is not my guidance. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, وَسَيَقُومُ فِيهِمْ رِجَالٌ, and there will be men amongst them that will rise. What are they? قُلُوبُهُمْ قُلُوبُ الشَّيَاطِينَ فِي جُثْمَانِ إِنسٍ, their hearts are the hearts of shaitan, devils in human flesh. So Hudayfa asked him, what should I do? If I reach this, the description that you just said, Ya ikhwa, they come and say, yeah, but they rule in the ruling of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We say, how? The sunnah is not the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The ruling is, the guidance is not the guidance of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some men will rise amongst them, their hearts are devils, the hearts of devils in human flesh. Ya ikhwa, how are these ruling by the ruling of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And Shaykh Falah Mundakar, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on him, has said this, and we translated a video that says this, and the Shaykh explaining this. And this hadith, where is this? In Sahih Muslim, ya ikhwa, in Sahih Muslim, not in other, yani this is authentic hadith, and this is one amongst 100 others. Subhanallah. They say, they still, no, they rule by their, there's none of this. The Prophet didn't say any of that. No, he said the opposite, that the sunnah of them are not the sunnah of the Prophet. The guidance is not the guidance. So he asked him, he said, what should I do if I witness this time and these people? He said, تسمع وتطيع للأمير. You hear and you obey for the ruler. And then he added, the Prophet ﷺ said, وَإِن ضَرَبَ ظَهْرَكَ وَأَخَذَ مَالَكَ. Even if he flogs, yani he hits your back and he takes your money. You might say, why? What is the wisdom behind this? Well, if you make khuruj, it's not just going to be your back and your money. Understand this, ya ikhwa. When people make khuruj, it's everybody's backs, it's everybody's money, it's everybody's women, pride and honor. What happens, ya ikhwa? Rapes happen. Raping of women who are, yani chastity is on top of their list. Women, and killing happens, and money is wasted, and buildings are demolished, and evil happens, ya ikhwa. Throughout all of history, I'm not talking just now, I'm talking 1,400 years. When such stuff happen, there's a lot of bad things that happen. When clashes happen and when killing happen, this is, ya ikhwa, the Prophet ﷺ told us to ask for afiyah, for safeguarding from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to wish for that, for destruction. So all goodness is in this. You have to understand, ya ikhwa, we have to understand these things. This is the correct aqeedah. This is the proof. You bring somebody who doesn't agree with you, you tell him this is the Quran and the Sunnah. Will he follow? He will never follow. Khalas, his mind is, he absorbed so much, he's absorbing so much this that he doesn't care. Even if you tell him Prophet Muhammad said this, he said no, my mind doesn't accept this. This is why it's bid'ah. If your mind doesn't accept this, Islam is not your mind. So Shaykh Falah Mundakar says what? I'm telling you what Shaykh Falah Mundakar said. I'm explaining to you how he explains it. So Shaykh Falah Mundakar and the people of Sunnah and Jama'ah and Shaykh Al-Albani and Shaykh bin Uthaymeen and Shaykh bin Baz and every alim worth the name, of our time that we know, Sheikh Salih Fawzan, Sheikh Abdul Muhsin Al-Abbad, and so they explain it like this. They explain it like this. So, and this is a miracle. This is a sign from Allah, because what the Prophet ﷺ says happens even 400 years later, 800 years later, 1,000 years. You understand, ya ikhwa? And it did happen. Subhanallah. So what is the ruling on ruling with other than the ruling of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The Sahaba, they made the tafsir. And our Sheikh Yusuf Sakit, when somebody came to him and said, ruling by other than the ruling of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, Ibn Abbas said, kufrun duna kufr. So this is minor kufr. Doesn't get you outside the millah of Islam. You produce the authority. Give me the evidence from the explanation of the Sahaba that this is major kufr that gets you outside of the fold of Islam. And he couldn't reply to Sheikh Yusuf Sakit. So Sheikh Yusuf Sakit said, this is it. The argument is done. The argument is done. Until the authority, there's no argument. I follow Ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Abbas, one of the Sahaba of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he is Turjuman al-Quran and Habr al-Ummah, one of the ulama of the Ummah and explainers of the Quran. Naam.
When Musa alayhi salam came with that compelling proof, Pharaoh and his people turned away. That is, they turned away from the truth and paid no attention to it, and they criticized it in the worst manner, saying of Musa alayhi salam that he was a magician or a madman. In other words, they thought that Musa alayhi salam was either a magician, and what he had brought was charlatanry that had nothing to do with the truth at all, or he was a madman who was not to be blamed for what he said or did, because he was not sane. However, they, especially Pharaoh, knew that Musa alayhi salam was telling the truth. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says elsewhere, they rejected the signs, although in their hearts they were certain that they were true, out of wickedness and arrogance. In Surah An-Naml, ayah 14. Musa alayhi salam said to Pharaoh, you know full well that none but the Lord of the heavens and the earth has sent down these signs as clear evidence. In Surah Al-Isra, ayah 102. So we seized him and his troops and flung them into the sea, and he was to blame. For he was a sinner and transgressor who disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah seized him with the vehement grip of one who is almighty, omnipotent. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, and adding, there is not another sign in the story of Ad, when we sent against them the devastating wind that was devoid of all good. It spared nothing it came upon, but it reduced it to ruin and decay. Shaykh As-Si'di rahimahullah explains, and there is another sign in the story of Ad, that is, there was another mighty sign among Ad, a well-known tribe, when we sent against them the devastating wind that was devoid of all good, that is, there was nothing good in it. That was when they rejected their prophet Hud alayhi salam. It spared nothing it came upon, but it reduced it to ruin and decay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them despite their strength and power, which is indicative of His perfect might and omnipotence, for nothing is beyond Him, who wreaks vengeance on those who disobey Him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, and adding, there is another sign in the story of Thamud, when it was said to them, enjoy life for a little while. But they insolently transgressed the command of their Lord, so the devastating punishment overtook them whilst they were looking on. They could not withstand the punishment and could not ward it off. Shaykh Sa'di rahimahullah explains, and there is another sign in the story of Thamud, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Salih alayhi salam to them, but they stubbornly rejected him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him the she-camel as a visible sign, but that only increased them in stubbornness and aversion. So it was said to them, enjoy life for a little while. But they insolently transgressed the command of their Lord, so the devastating punishment, namely the destructive blast, overtook them whilst they were looking on, and saw the punishment with their own eyes. They could not withstand, that is, they could not be saved from the punishment and could not ward it off from themselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, and the people of Nuh, adding, were destroyed by a devastating punishment before them. They were indeed a rebellious and wicked people. Shaykh Sa'di rahimahullah explains, that is, Allah did likewise to the people of Nuh, when they rejected Nuh alayhi salam and rebelled against the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah sent against them the heaven and the earth, pouring and gushing forth with water, and He drowned them all, and did not leave any of the disbelievers alive. This is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in dealing with those who disobey Him.
Naam. We have one of the brothers who's saying, please clarify. The Harun was a messenger? Naam. I previously thought there were no two messengers present simultaneously. Ya akhi, we just read Ibrahim and Lut. We just read in the ayat that we just read that the angels came to Ibrahim talking about Lut and his that they will go to al-Mu'tafika, to his people, and the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here you go, two prophets now at the same time, and in the ayah it says arsil ila Harun. So it's mentioned in the Quran that Musa alayhi salam has asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make his brother a prophet like him, or a messenger like him. And this, if we go to Surah Ash-Shu'ara, ayah 13, so even the word that is used in Arabic is arsil, so this is chapter 26. Which ayah is it? So this is in the beginning. So 13. So what did so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so he said, so Musa said, قال رب إني أخاف أن يكذبون. He said, my Lord, indeed I fear that they will deny me, that they won't believe me. ويضيق صدري ولا ينطلق لساني فأرسل إلى هارون. And that my chest would tighten and my tongue will not be fluent. So send for Aaron. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made Harun a messenger. Understood, ya akhi? Na'am, wa fika barakallah. Now continue.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, we built the heaven with might, and verily we are still expanding it. And we spread out the earth.
And bi-aidin here means might. Bi-aid in this ayah, the ulama, they say aid from ada ya'udu, not from al-yad, not from the word hand, here from the word power. So this is different than when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says bal yadahu mabsutatan, that verily his two hands are open, giving. You understand, ya ikhwa? So these are hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we attribute. But here, this is different. This is from ada ya'udu, which is a power, just like the ulama explain in the people of Sunnah and Jama'ah. Nah.
And we spread out the earth. How gracious is He who smoothed it out. And of all things we have created pairs, so that you may pay heed. So flee to Allah. Verily, I am a clear warner to you from Him. Do not associate with Allah any other God. Verily, I am a clear warner to you from Him. Shaykh As-Si'di rahimahullah explains, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, highlighting His great might, we built the heaven, that is, we created it and built it well, and we made it a roof for the earth and all that is on it. With might, that is, with immense power and strength, and verily, we are still expanding it in all directions. And we also bestow expensive and abundant provision upon our slaves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not leave any creature in the midst of the wilderness or the depths of the sea, or in the upper or lower realms. But He subhanahu wa ta'ala causes provision to reach it as it needs, and He subhanahu wa ta'ala sends it blessings to suffice it. So glory be to the one who bestows His generosity upon all creatures, and blessed be the one whose mercy encompasses all of creation. And we spread out the earth, that is, we have made it spread out for people so that they will be able to do whatever they have it to in order to meet their needs, such as building dwellings, planting, cultivating, tilling the soil, settling, and following routes that lead to their destinations. Because the earth has been spread out, one may think that it may be beneficial in all respects, or it may be beneficial in some ways but not others. Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He has smoothed it out in the best way, and He praises Himself for that, saying, how gracious is He who smoothed it out. For His ibad, as dictated by His wisdom, mercy, and generosity. And of all things we have created pairs, that is, two genders, male and female, of all types of animals, so that you may pay heed to the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has bestowed upon you, as He has decreed that on the basis of wisdom, making the pairs male and female the means of the perpetuation of all types of animals, so that you will raise them, take care of them, and look after them, and thus attain many benefits. Having called people to look at His signs, which would lead them to fear Him and turn to Him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now enjoins that which is the purpose of all these things, which is to flee to Him. What is meant is to flee from that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates, both outwardly and inwardly, to that which He subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, both outwardly and inwardly, fleeing from ignorance to knowledge, from disbelief to faith, from sin to obedience, and from heedlessness to remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whoever does all of that has done all that religion requires of him. He will be spared all that he fears, and he will attain all that he seeks. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes turning to Him as fleeing, because turning to anyone other than Him will result in all kinds of fearful outcomes and troubles, whereas turning to Him leads to all that one loves: security, joy, happiness, and triumph. You would flee from everyone you fear, except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more you fear Him, the more you flee to Him. Verily, I am a clear warner to you from Him. That is, I am a warner to you of the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bringing a clear message of warning. Do not associate with Allah any other God. This is part of fleeing to Allah.
Over and over. If you haven't noticed, brothers, over every time we read Tawheed, 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 Tawheed in the Quran. So we don't listen to people that say, oh, Tawheed can be learned in 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps repeating it. The Quran from beginning till end, it's all Tawheed. Subhanallah. This is 10 minutes? Allah al-musta'an. Nah.
This is part of fleeing to Allah. Rather, this is the basis of fleeing to Him. For a person to flee from taking any other God among the idols, rivals, graves, and so on, things that are worshipped besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and devoting His worship, fear, hope, supplication, and repentance to His Lord alone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, likewise, no messenger came to those before
this
them.
Is where, so this is where we stopped, right? This is the goal of today, yeah?
Yeah, it should be, yeah.
No. طيب. يا أخي شكر الله لك for this excellent reading. Wallahi, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. So you've been reading for the past maybe 4 hours with some breaks. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for attending. My dear brothers, Ya ikhwa, al-ilm, knowledge, seeking ilm needs patience. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be included in the hadith that the angels make istighfar, and even the fish in the sea, they make dua and istighfar for the one who teaches, and for, of course, and the malaika and so on, also for the ones who are seeking ilm. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala أن يعلمنا ما ينفعنا وينفعنا بما علمتنا بما يعلمنا. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say, Allahumma علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم اغفر لنا ولوالدينا ولوالديهم ولذرياتهم ولمشايخنا ولعلمائنا وولاة أمرنا وللمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وأنعم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Do you have questions, brothers?